and you're working with at least 26 students who have an FASD. If you're there for 5 years, add 4 to 5 new students each year. Now you're up to 42 to 46 students with an FASD. How much training have you had? If you're a junior high or a high school teacher with 5 periods of students in your classes, class size 20 to 30, you're teaching 5 to 6 students with an FASD each year. If you're teaching 6 periods, then it's 6 to 7 students each year. If you're there for 5 years, you're teaching 25 to 35 students with an FASD over that time. How much training have you had? With that FASD? How much training have you had? If you're a principal or student services personnel or teen at a high school in this district, you are serving 143 students with an FASD each year. If you remain at the high school for 5 years, if there are 36 new students each subsequent year, now you've touched the lives of 287 students with an FASD. How much training have you had? I have included students who attend our therapeutic alternative schools, but I suspect the prevalence of FASD among those students is probably even higher than general ed schools. If you are a superintendent or admin or board of education member in this district, you are affecting the lives of 844 students with an FASD in any given year. How much training have you had? You need to have training to begin to know what it is that you don't know, what it looks like, why these students haven't been diagnosed. The truth is, we don't need to confirm diagnosis to recognize when someone's brain functions differently. So how do we recognize this as brain-based disability? And how do we intervene effectively and support families? I also wanted to bring the attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because if we look at the number of Hispanic students in our district and the prevalence of FASD, there are 219 students with an FASD. For our student population, that would be 84 students with an FASD. So to be clear, those are students with neurocognitive diversity on top of the students of color. How much training have we had? I again asked this district to have training, and I know that this office has said we have training on executive functioning and on drama, which is great, but we need to have common language and common philosophy because then we can have consistency and intentionality. I will be doing a training very briefly at Illinois Council for Children with Behavior Disorders in February this year. Lester was in person. Last year I didn't see anybody from this district at that conference. There are lots of great presentations besides mine. Some of them are functional behavior assessments. Those are outdated and really not best practice for our students with neurodiverse challenges. And I asked this district to ask the State Board of Education for support in getting this information. And I don't want to share a lot of stats. I'll just briefly share a quick personal story. My daughter is in first grade, and she was sick the week before Christmas, and I didn't know if I'd be able to come and help with a holiday party like I was supposed to, so I let the parents know. And my brain said, hey, remember when your son was in second grade, and at the last minute, because of his behaviors, he wasn't allowed to participate. And I still went and worked that party because I was obligated to. But it said, well, he was warned that if he did this and this behavior continued, he would not be able to participate. I didn't know it was FASD likely at the time as part of that constellation, but do you think that missing that holiday party made him unable to change his behaviors? He knew what the consequence was. Do you think he wanted to miss that holiday party that his father was coming for? And I have lots of personal stories. If any of you want to meet with me and hear some more about that, this district has been helpful, communicative, when none of us really knew what was going on. So I thank them for that, but I don't want to give you the stats. So if you want to meet with me and hear more of those personal stories that come back flashing through my mind when I think if I'd only known then what I know now, I'll be happy to share those with you. Thank you again for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Ray.
Thank you. Donnie, audio colleague,
Should we share it with our cabinet people?
yeah.
What's the situation? We're having technical issues.
We're getting feedback from the website that are having some audio difficulties.
Are they able to fix that?
We're done? Oh, very good. All right.
Yes, item 5.1 is an update of our progress in regards to work that's been done and will be done regarding facilities as outlined in the strategic plan. Dr. Paskey has provided full presentation of board docs, and tonight we'll be providing board highlights of the presentation and to be able to answer any questions that the board has. So, Dr. Paskey? Good evening, Bill. How are you? Good to see you.
Good. While we're addressing the audio issue, we'll go ahead and talk through the summary portions just a few minutes. But it was included with the board documents.
Dr. Pissy, is the mic on in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay, it just wasn't coming through.
Okay. I'll try to talk right down. Is that a little better?
Or angle the mic a little bit.
There you go. This is not sensitive, so all right. Well, I brought Bill Queen with me today to take part in the conversation. I know, as the board knows, we've transitioned between directors of operations, and Bill has done a phenomenal job stepping into his new role and preparing for the many emergencies that we've already encountered. So on top of that, we also have the scheduled facility maintenance plan. And we've been talking about that, and just as we predicted at the beginning of the year, we have several things that we want to do, and based on the way our facilities are treating us, or maybe the way we treat our facilities, they have a different plan, and we've had to kind of change those priorities a bit. So we'll go through this and share with you the progress that we made today. So, as you recall, there's two goals for the facilities. There's two goals for the facilities aspect of our Vision 308 plan. Number one was to review the need for the general maintenance schedule for the next 10 years of work that should be done. And the second one was to develop a 5-year plan to address the physical capacity for our building program and needs ECU Academy, Transition, Brokaw, and also looking at our old proper facility as well. So based on that, there we go. The handout that we put together for you, the summary page that we'd like to try to go through with the board today, is just looking at the first column on the left, which are what are some of the indicators of success from the past year, and then what progress has been made on each indicator since that time. So as you see, we've gathered some feedback from our stakeholders, documented their concerns, evaluated their project priorities, and we end up taking that information and re-meeting with building principals, building engineers, to make sure that we actually captured all the building priorities that they had. And then we aligned those building needs with our debt service extension dollars for a timeline of funding source to meet those projects, to accomplish those projects. All of those projects have been identified. When we took a look at number one is what outside contractors would we need to use for that work, and what type of work could be complete in-house. So we looked at that as well. And Bill has been meeting with the staff and kind of breaking down that list and going through those priorities on what his staff can do resources, the work that we need to actually go up to RFE and bring outside help in. Another thing that we've been going over quite a bit is the first category, which was mission critical. What were those mission critical items? Are we addressing those in the first 3 to 5 years with debt service extension? We ended up going through that list and looking at that designation. We also begun the process of putting together RFPs, completing ones that were released last year, and then also submitting those RFPs, which we're in the process of writing, finalizing, getting those ready to release for summer work. Let's see. And then we are using the plan as a living, reading document. So in order to document what projects are being completed, for instance, the OHS roof that we did this summer, we went ahead and we took that off of the list and we put it back on the list at the end of the scheduled maintenance. So that is another project that is on the list, but 20 years from now, and that needs to be addressed. So we're keeping up with the projects and the work we're doing to make sure we're not losing sight of what we've done and what needs to be on radar for project completion. We've also got a standing item with the Finance and Facilities Committee. So when we meet, we have an opportunity to talk about not only the finances of the district at the time, but also to talk about the projects in terms of facilities that we want to discuss. We are meeting with appropriate program directors to discuss current enrollment or their enrollment projections, how they're seeing their programs grow, to make sure that we have room and capacity. We also are reporting on those program enrollment projections, continue to monitor that. And then also, finally, the last bullet point here is review program needs based on existing facility space. So comparing program needs and enrollment based on what we have existing and where we will need to make some changes. So that's kind of the update with the facility annual report. Like I said, we're transitioning from this was the work that Rob and I did last year at this time, and now that we've got Bill at the table, we're interested to get any feedback that you might have, and just know that Bill is taking ownership of that scheduled maintenance plan. And doing a good job with that. So if we want to scroll to the second page, the indicators of success reported at this time next year will be how we prioritize the capital projects and actually start completing those for the next level on the comprehensive facility plan. And then also, we are working with Cabinet right now on identifying and incorporating the district facility needs, utilizing EVA and Old Trotter. And once we meet with Cabinet on that and gather their feedback, we're going to meet with the ELD team, executive leadership team, and the program directors to gather more input on program and facility needs for their growing programs. And the very last thing there then is the board asked for some highlights or connections to the other areas of our Envision 308 plan. And the first is in terms of finance, the connection there is really coordinating the facility and grounds needs and building operation and preventative budget in our 5-year projection. As you know, for the next 3 years, we've got debt service extension dollars that we're using for these projects. Add in $1.5 million into our operations and maintenance budget for ongoing maintenance plans. And then the year after that, we're building in an additional $1.5 million or a total of $3 million for ongoing operations and maintenance projects. The district our size, based on the maintenance plan that we have identified with Huber, we're looking at about a $6 to $7.5 million operational project budget per year. So we're about halfway there by the time the 5-year projections are up. As far as student learning, the connection there is really just maintaining a safe and secure facility and grounds necessary for the programs that we offer. Support for student learning, again, maintaining safe and secure facilities and grounds for the program needs. And then community partnerships, we're continuing to coordinate shared services for facilities and ground needs and identify potential grant-funded opportunities to help us meet our goal of completing more of the project on our scheduled maintenance list. So that's the summary. And there is a second item in board docs, which is the full presentation. If the board has any questions or any feedback, we'd be happy to take any questions after this point.
You know, I want to talk about special education programs, and you were talking about space limitations, you know, programs that need to move. I just want to be very careful in moving our special education programs. And I want to make sure that you figure out and do it appropriately in the transition from elementary to junior high, the friends of elementary school, and their elementary friends go to one high school and they go to one junior high and they go to another, so they're kind of starting over. So these are kids, you know, most vulnerable.
Yeah.
So
And that's
you know,
where
I know that it's, you know, there's it's a puzzle, but we can't do that.
Yeah, and those are decisions that we will be making as buildings and ground director and chief finance officer. So that's one where the executive directors, obviously, we're good at teaching and learning and knowing what
It's you know, your team is the one that's, you know, finding out the space and, you know, the needs, looking into the principals and their feedback. And so I just want to make sure that that's out there and high priority,
Yeah.
very high.
Yeah. And I think Bill would share the same. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll say this again, and you know, I don't think it's a mystery that there are definitely those in the community who don't trust the finances of the district, and no favors are done for us when apples are not always compared to apples, right? Just as an example, and I'm not picking on any particular taxing body, but there are taxing bodies that have access to local revenues that we don't. So it's hard to sit here and say, okay, well, this taxing body holds a levy, how come the school district doesn't, right? As an example. Well, those taxing bodies have access to other revenues that the school district doesn't. They also don't spend their property taxes on hardly anything compared to what the school district does, because they have access to other revenues that we don't. But a process that works in many other districts, quite frankly, doesn't work here. And I'm proud of the board. For the first time that I'm aware of, we came with 5-year projections that showed us what things would look like with a levy, without a levy. I appreciate that. With EBF, without EBF. It should have been very eye-opening to everyone. But I'm going to tell you, I don't think it went far enough. You've heard me voice this a million times. And for those who pay attention, they've heard me voice it a million times. In addition, I think what you're going to have to do, and I said this a long time ago, I said this years ago, you're going to have to actually show people what it means, right? For some reason, $8 million in cuts doesn't mean anything to anyone. Like, I don't know why, but it doesn't. I'm not sitting up here advocating to, hey, let's cut. But I think you're going to actually have to show people what that translates to. And I do take it's serious whenever we have to raise a levy. I don't take it lightly. And I think in order for us to do this process, we're going to have to do all of the front work ahead of time. And so show people what that translates to. Because, again, it's not an honest conversation to sit here and say raise the levy or not. That's not the full conversation. The full conversation is raise the levy or we don't turn the lights on over here, right? Because all of this stuff costs money. Or we either increase the levy or what's the fund for our preventative maintenance? What's the balance of that fund right now? I'm asking you. Yeah,
Well,
it's zero.
It's zero.
It's zero, right? So, and here's the thing: for those who are new on the scene, you know, there was a time, you remember this, Dr. Sparlin, the bright lights in the auditorium, and we sat there. I remember sitting there with many people, very business oriented people who we sat there and made a lot of cuts, right? And that was one of the things we cut. And none of it was comfortable. So I think you're going to need that. You're going to need to show people that. I'll say it. I'll ask for it again. I've asked for it a million times. I appreciate what we've been given so far. And I'll continue to ask for it.
Okay.
I have one. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, please.
No, go. I just have one question. In the projections that you provided previously, and it's just really into a comment that you made earlier, that we've had to, what we have here is listed the prioritizing for 10 years or 20 years out based on the allocation. But from that, we've had surprises, obviously, since Bill has come in. And so how has that impacted the things that we were supposed to fix this year? But did something break that was set for later, or was it something brand new and now it's actually going to cost us more than what we actually projected?
Yeah, you know, that's a really great question. And fortunately, Kluber and the central office maintenance team put together a thorough enough plan that what is breaking was on that list. It's just they were on the list for maybe 3 years down the road.
Okay.
So now we're replacing it, and one that we thought had to be replaced this year, well, that one's going to kind of keep going for 2 more years and take the place of when that original replacement should have been.
But what people may not understand with that list is that each year we prioritized, I think over the course of time, let's just say that $6 to $7.5 million. But if something that broke that we were slated to fix 3 years from now breaks in this year, does that increase the amount of money that we needed of the things that are mission critical this year? That again, the balance is zero. And so I don't know what the thing was, but whatever it was, because everything on here is a capitalized project, so it's significant. So I'm just trying to make sure we understand that, you know, the budgets and the dollars that we have in order to make sure that our facilities are safe, as we said in the presentation, as one of the priorities, we have to figure out where to get this money from.
Yeah, and the nice thing about that is the debt service extension. So like I told Jared, the money in that budget right now is zero, but we do have the debt service extension, the money we borrowed, which was $18 million. We can spend all of that money now. So we can right now, if there was a project that was bid out, we can spend those dollars on the projects that we wanted to do. We would exhaust that $18 million sooner than what we had planned. And the issue with that is, in our second or third year here, if we have another emergency happen, well, we've exhausted our $18 million, and now we're going into contingency funds.
And so I want to make sure that everybody understands that it's not prudent for us to spend all $18 million in the first year, because if an emergency happens next year, then what will we do?
Right.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the 18 million isn't even enough.
Right,
Not
you know, not even close.
It's nowhere near
Yeah.
close enough.
Can I ask how much we keep paying Kluber to do all these assessments? Because they in 2020, they did a deferred plan, and they also did a facility maintenance an energy plan. What they didn't call it was what they called it in 2022 when they charged us again, and they called it a scheduling plan. We also had it done in 2014. We also had it done in 2015. We also had it, if I'm not mistaken, done in 2018. So we keep paying them to have these plans done. And while I realize we have new people in place, there has to be, if you're going to be a good steward of somebody's money, you have to also know where that plan is. And the other thing that I have not seen on here is we have, what do we call it, a general maintenance. We don't have a preventative maintenance plan. And some of that is just going out and changing filters so that these machines last 5 to 10 years longer. So that's not in any of this.
I think that I've seen
so
that,
there's
yeah.
general maintenance on here, but I don't see a preventative maintenance plan.
We do have a
Yeah, I've
preventative
seen,
maintenance
I've
plan.
seen that,
We do.
yeah.
For, where's that at?
Well, I don't know if it's in here, but I mean, I've only been on the board for, I don't know, 9 months or whatever. And
I've been on
I've
for
seen
4
that.
years.
was in
Yeah, so
July.
we have,
We
Well,
were
no, no,
given-
that's what I'm saying.
I'm
I've seen
looking
that,
at it
yeah.
right now.
Where's
Yeah.
it at?
So I have a question because I appreciate
It was
the
a
shorter
meeting.
presentation, thank you. And I appreciate the overview, but where do we know, like, for instance, from the July, the big comprehensive scheduled maintenance plan, 23-24, is the $19,570 that we expected to spend at Boulder Hill, has that been completed? Grand Park Elementary, have all these things been completed?
No, those are the projects that we've got on the queue for writing the RFPs. So we're writing the RFPs. We've done, I think, 3 or 4 of them, and we have to do the rest of those for the roofs and the boilers, the bigger work. So we're going to release those RFPs and hope to get that work done in the summer of '23 and for the '24 school year.
Okay, and that, wait, the summer of 20,
This year, yeah.
Okay.
This summer.
This- So I should
This
be
summer
looking at-
for next year, you say, right?
Yeah.
okay. And then my question to
has
that
got
is,
a
then
lot of
how did
work
we
ahead
get
of
these numbers? And was it before inflation and we've seen the cost of steel and conduit and PVC and all of that stuff go up? Are these numbers reflective of that? I mean, July was still probably appropriate for that, but where did you get the $19,000 if the RFP hasn't already gone out?
Yeah, that was estimates through the architects on
Okay.
work that they've done. So the architects provided those to us with some inflationary figures built into those. But you're right, the one thing that we monitor very closely, and Bill will be sure to share that with you when we do a memo for the board on, hey, we had the bid closing and here's what we got back. This is what we estimated it to be at.
Right.
This is what it actually came in at. And we've been surprised by a few. Some of them have been 2/3 higher than what they were supposed to be, and some of them come in 1/3 lower. So it depends on the project and the workload of those people providing us the bids as well.
So, and I'm kind of asking these questions to make a point. One of the goals that we gave the administration was to build a reserve, and I know that our 5-year projections, and our goal was 20%, and our 5-year projections, we're looking at about 10.5%. And one of the things that's really important for the community to know is that when we don't have a reserve, these things not only become mission critical, but we then have to make cuts because we don't have an option. We do not have a little, purse to go back to. So when we're talking about potentially not levying, not getting EBF, not doing certain things, there is a compound nature of this entire process, and Jared has said it multiple times. We've tried to reiterate it multiple times throughout at least the 2 years that I've been on the board. It is election season, and I hope that all of our constituents in the community are asking the candidates these questions about what would you do? How would you cut $8 million? What would you do about the fact we don't have a preventative maintenance fund? If you aren't for levying, and so forth. So I strongly encourage everyone to ask the candidates that are doing that, because this is something that these decisions have compounded from years ago, and we just continue to kind of kick the can down the road. So neither one of you, thank you. I just want to make that clear. But for the first time, we have this really in-depth, comprehensive program, and it makes it real, which is what Jared, had said he is asking for from the cuts perspective. But it also makes it real, and I encourage everybody to go back to this, that if we don't have some money, what we're not going to be able to do on this plan. And it's pretty, we lose air conditioning typically once a summer from a school, and get emails from parents and grandparents, make sure you get the air conditioning working. We're talking beyond air conditioning, so we just need to keep bringing that to the forefront and talking about that. So thank you both.
So where are we with regard to our grant opportunities?
Yeah, so we did submit a grant for the capital maintenance project grant, which was a $50,000 match, and luckily we had a project that had not gone out yet, was bid out, but had not been
'Cause it's not in board docs.
officially out and any spending begun. So we used that. It ended up being, I believe it was like a $1.2 million roofing project, and that will get $50,000 for that, and that's coming out of debt service extension. And there's 2 other grants right now that Bill and I are taking a look at. Unfortunately, some of the grant opportunities our district doesn't qualify for. We are not low enough in our financial state compared to other Illinois districts, so we don't qualify for those, but we'll continue to monitor those and submit for those that we can. And the one thing that we're keeping an eye on is something that Dr. Sparlin worked very hard on the past few years, and that is the $40 million in appropriations that we should be hearing more about in the near future, and would really put us in a good spot if we got those dollars back. So for those on the board who might not recall, or those in the community who might not recall, in 2004, we spent money on buildings knowing that the state was going to reimburse us for those costs. And in 2004, they ended up not reimbursing us those dollars. So the district spent all of their funds not being reimbursed to the tune of about, I think it was 38 million, almost $40 million. And the state is now looking at funding those that out-service debt. So we hope to see that in the near future.
That's a big if.
That is
It's
a
a
big
really
if.
big if. Can
I
you
remain
talk
hopeful.
to us a little? Well, yeah, we all do,
Can
right?
I do a follow? What was the $1.2 million project?
That was there was a roofing project at OH. It was the cafeteria, the back side of OH. We did the front side
Yes.
this summer.
I just wondered. Thank you.
When we don't meet our financial reserve as a goal, as well as the recommended percentage as the state requires, how does that impact us?
That's a really interesting question. I think something that the community might not be so familiar with is our district's financial profile that's awarded to us from the State Board of Education. They basically give us a score of 1 to 5 and put us in states of financial, positive financial standing, where it could go into financial warning, financial risk. And on the 5 elements on the rubric that they use to judge us on, 3 of the elements are related directly to our fund balance. That being, number 1, do you have a 20 to 25% fund balance? We don't. We get a low score on that.
Yeah.
Number 2, the fund balance is directly related to how much cash on hand do you have on a daily basis. Well, since we don't have a fund balance, we only have 55 days of cash on hand. And after spending down that fund balance, we need to borrow money for our cash flow. So that's how the fund balance affects us there. And then, the third one is escaping me. There's cash
I think
on
our
hand.
bond percentage, right?
That's another one, but that's not related to the reserve.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
There was
Yeah,
one
yeah, go
directly
ahead.
related to the reserve, and it's escaping my mind right now. I apologize. But to
We
Dominic's
get the
point
point.
too. Yeah. 3 of the areas we are negatively hit because of our fund balance. One of them we're negatively hit because we have a larger
Expenditure to
debt
revenue ratio.
level than what we should have legally. We only should have about $310 million worth of borrowing capacity. But in 2004, we went to the state, we had that level raised, and we currently have about $315 million. So we have more money long-term debt than what typically we should have. So we're hit there as well. Oh, and the third item was short-term debt. That was the third item, is the level of short-term borrowing. Well, we have tax anticipation warrants every year, which is short-term borrowing. So because of our cash flow, we don't have cash on hand, we don't have the reserve, and we have to short-term borrow. So we have a negative profile for the state of Illinois that we are aware of. We are maintaining and communicating and making sure that we don't fall any less than we are in terms of the state standing right now.
So these are all reasons why we should increase our fund balance.
Correct.
We can't
How
do
come
that
Dr.
without
Scarlett
levy.
can say thing in 30 seconds? That takes me.
And I think you had mentioned last time that it was $5 million every year from the time that we didn't levy, which is compounded
Correct.
to like $35 million as of now and every year going forward. And that keeps us from increasing our fund balance because of, that's just one reason why,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and who wants to have to borrow money to pay their bills, right? That's like a payday loan
Well,
in a really big way.
Yeah.
and the thing is with that, if you're gonna do that, like, so let's talk about that. If you're gonna not raise the levy, then you need to do your due diligence, which is what ends up being the outcome from that, which is you got to go and figure out what you're going to cut, which is why you have the auditorium full of people and the bright lights and everything else, which somehow got forgotten about. I don't know how, but it was a
I
pretty
was there
packed
too.
house.
Yeah.
I know it was a packed house, but nonetheless, like then you have to do that. Like that's I don't know how else. There's no way to avoid that. Like you, one or the other. You know, that's the full story. That's the full narrative. You can't avoid one without the other.
Good. I think Bill and I would just like to thank the board. We were just looking at each other here. I don't think we've seen board members having this level of conversation, so we appreciate how much you know about our finances, about our facilities, and we really appreciate the feedback that you've given us and are helping to educate the community on these issues as well.
Hey, can I just clarify, because I just went back and looked at the Kluber presentation. I'm not talking, when I talk about preventative maintenance, I'm not talking about periodic, I'm not talking about corrective, I'm talking about what are we doing with our boilers and chillers to keep them lasting 5 more years, which is
Yeah.
not on here. It's not as part of their plan.
You know what, I'll put that down. Bill and I can talk about that, but we do, for instance, I was with AJ, one of our central office grounds gentlemen, central maintenance gentleman, and he ends up doing what he calls punching tubes. So making sure that all of the cooling water is filtering through the way it should through our air conditioning. We replace filters in the classroom, so we can get you a list of things that we do on a preventative maintenance.
I'm looking for something as a district that we're doing district-wide that will extend the life of the high-dollar equipment, because here's what's happening. We're buying equipment from Canada because we can't get it in the US right now. And it's still like that. And a lot of our machines are out of date, and they're gonna have to be replaced at some point. So at some point, you have to build up some sort of reserves, so, because they're gonna go out. But we don't have, Boulder Hill, for example. Boulder Hill was out when it was 100 degrees out.
So it's funny you just brought that up, Ally. I currently have a service agreement that I need to go over with John for the boilers alone. That's every boiler in the district-wide, to start servicing those.
Right, but we should have people in-house that can do that. We shouldn't be.
I do, but I just don't have enough of them. So as a district, we're big. I have 23 locations to take care of. I have 2 preventative maintenance that are central, and I have 1 at each high school. So that's a total of 4. We've done pretty good, but as we get bigger, we do need to grow that pool. So we've always kind of leaned on help from outside services to help service those boilers and chillers and stuff of that nature.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, 6.1, Superintendent Report.
All right, well, thank you, Mrs. Simulton, and good evening, Board.
Can you guys call Lori Doyle back? Somebody hung up on her.
No, she's on her way in.
Oh, she.
Oh,
well,
maybe she wants to listen.
She
until
just said, "Are we
gets
still on the
here?"
facility presentation? I can't watch YouTube." They hung up.
Let's see if we can get her back, just so while she's driving in
Yeah.
the car.
So we're still having
Some kind of, yeah.
YouTube issues.
I got it. Did we fix our YouTube issues? or
I
no?
don't know. I
Oh,
wasn't
okay,
really
they're
watching
fixed.
it to see if, I just noticed it. I know Soror has one guy that does all that and maintains it, and that's 28 buildings. But we didn't hire him.
Hello?
Okay. Tell her to mute herself.
Oh.
Oh, there she goes. Okay.
All right. Well, I'd like to start out my comments this evening by welcoming everyone back to the second semester of the 22-23 school year. And just before break, I was informed by the National Board Resource Center at Illinois State University and Illinois National Board of Professional Teaching Standards that the following teachers in our school district were renewed for the National Board certification: Robin Saris, Christina Hernandez, Brett Malice, Pam Phelps, Elizabeth Brigadich, Angela Scharbert, Amy Severinsky, Joyce Schumate, and Kelly Waldron. So congratulations to each of those teachers that I just mentioned. And congratulations for not only earning the National Board certification, but for also maintaining that certification, because it is a prestigious certification. So congratulations to each of them. The following is an update in regards to what's been going on over the past couple months in regards to our transportation. So, as we all know, due to a nationwide bus shortage, busing has been a significant challenge this year, resulting in sometimes some substantial delays. I'd like to thank our parents for and our students for their patience, understanding, and cooperation as we've as we've worked through this to provide the best transportation service that we can under the current circumstances for our kids. So over the past couple months, the route studies have been conducted to find opportunities to combine stops and to shorten the routes and to combine routes. Over winter break, our transportation staff worked hard to adjust routing in order to create more efficient transportation for our students, and route updates were posted in Tyler last week, and parents were notified. Additionally, we're working to our recruitment efforts are continuing to increase the number of drivers that we have on staff. We're also monitoring the changes that we've made to ensure that those changes have been addressed to the best of our abilities. It's important to note that the changes that we've made to the best of our ability are been done without probably the most needed variable in this equation, and that is having the proper number of drivers that we need. So I'd like to send a word of thanks to our transportation staff for their hours and dedication and commitment towards improving the transportation, and for our drivers and our monitors who are covering extra routes and providing the extra time to benefit our students. They should know that everyone up here appreciates all their work. My final comment for this evening is to share that on tonight's personnel report, the board will be approving my retirement from the position of superintendent at the end of the 22-23 school year. I would like to thank this board and previous boards for the opportunity to serve the students, staff, and community of Oswego for the past 11 years of my career. It's been my greatest honor to have served as your superintendent for the past 7 years, and I thank the board for that opportunity. I look forward to continuing our good work together and between now and June 30th, and to support the board in any way that I can in regards to as you search for my successor. So that is my update for this evening, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sparlin. So we'll have many opportunities. Well, anyone want to?
Yeah.
We're going to have.
Good luck.
We're going to have many opportunities to say our final goodbyes and to express our gratitude for the many years of service that Dr. Sparlin has provided to our district. And so we look forward to several more months with him, and then we will have some opportunities to express our gratitude. One of the things as a board, we hire one person technically for the most part, and that's the superintendent. And so in doing that, in order to help us find his successor, there are ways in which we go about doing that. And one of those ways, which is traditional but yet most effective and efficient, is a search firm. And so I want to open it up to the board to kind of share their thoughts about why this might be an appropriate way to go, or not. But I'd like to hear from you all regarding your thoughts on that.
Which side of the room which side you want to start with?
Whichever one you want.
Well, I'll go first. A couple things then. We're gonna come back to we can come back and talk about busing, right? Because I do want to talk about busing. Sorry, but
Okay.
at some point
We'll come back
I
and
always
talk
like to
about
put the kids first, and so
We'll talk about busing after.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
agenda item later in the agenda.
okay, because I do want to talk about the busing and the kids. Not listen, Dr. Sparlin, I'm gracious and I'm very grateful. Grateful is the word I was looking for. Grateful for everything and so forth. But well, first of all, before I get to your thought, LaTanya, I remember running in 2015, and I remember the situation with the superintendent in 2015, and I remember very well thinking that where the community was, and thinking to myself that the community should have as much of a voice in this process as possible. And one of the ways that the community can have a voice in that process at the time was by going to the polls. And so while I believe in having a process that works, one of the things that I think has plagued our district is that we have not at times looked at what works elsewhere. We've cherry-picked at times. We've said, hey, let's do what this district does. And then it's been, well, okay, but they also do this. Well, I don't want to look at that part. Well, you got to look at the whole package, right? You can't just cherry-pick things. You have to look at the whole package if you're going to look at things. And one thing I'm adamant about is I do not think that a superintendent should be picked before this election is over. I think the superintendent, whoever comes in, should have the support of whoever the 7 people are who sit up here, and they should have, or that person should have that support. However, I think we have many districts that are unified districts, that are large districts in our area that have done a phenomenal job at this, and the pool is small. It is decreasing the amount of people who want to take on this position. So I think if we think we are the smartest people in the room, no offense, but I don't think we are. So going through this process and doing our due diligence to find out and passing on that knowledge, I think is the route we should take.
Thank you.
You tend to agree. So we want to get it right. So, and the community and not just through the polls, but through their input, direct input, we can definitely utilize that in the process. And it sounds as though these outside firms look to that as well. So, yeah, search firm makes the most sense to me.
I don't have a problem with the new board picking the superintendent, but I think you need an outside superintendent, because I don't think right now we have an internal candidate who is going to meet the needs that we have right now.
Eugene?
So, yeah, I think an outside firm is most definitely the best way just to broaden our scope. I don't know if I would say I don't think that we have an internal candidate, because I don't know all 2,500 members within the district, but I absolutely believe that a search firm will give us the opportunity to make that the process objective and to cast our nets wide so that we can get the best possible candidate for the district that the students and the staff deserve. So I agree that it should be a search firm.
I didn't prepare anything, and I typically get in a lot of trouble when I don't do that. So I look forward to going viral again tomorrow. So here we go. Number one, thank you for 11 years of service through one of the darkest times in education. We often do not agree with each other, and you have proven something to me that still exists, but is fleeting in this world, which is we can have really crucial conversations. We can highly disagree, even maybe not be so happy when we walk out of the room, but we continue to treat each other with respect and kindness. And I pray and hope that really what seems like a really simple thing starts to make a return to our community and to the world at large. So for that, I thank you. I thank you for allowing me to have the space to completely disagree with you, to not understand your point of view, to maybe be closed-minded sometimes, but to continually address me and treat me with kindness and respect. And I thank you for that. It is not always easy to be in your position and to remain calm, and you have done it many times when I may not have been able to do that. So this morning, my boss said to our leadership team, everything you do is a choice. Being happy is a choice. Being disagreeable is a choice. Being disgruntled is a choice. And so we all have those choices to make. And I have seen you consistently make the choice to show up and make the best of a situation. So thank you for that. I just want to say that, and it struck me right now when I was sharing that. I haven't always made the right choices, and I'm trying to do better. So thank you for that and the service that you have provided to this district. Also, I just want to say, I don't know how to let tonight go and not talk about the fact that a 6-year-old brought a gun and shot his teacher. Obviously, it made the news headlines, and I do believe there is some sort of faint connected dot to what I just was sharing with you, which is we have lost the ability to disagree with each other without there being some sort of massive other reaction. And so I have thought about that story over and over in my head today, and it's disheartening. And my heart is broken for that little person who doesn't understand what they did, and for his or her family, for the teacher who is recovering in the hospital tonight, and the fact that once again she proved to be a hero by getting all of her students out safe. Our teachers should not have to do that. Our kids shouldn't have to have all of the training they have to, and teachers shouldn't have to go through all the training they have to, and we shouldn't have to worry about that, but we do, so we keep moving forward. So I don't know if I connected the dots tonight. Sometimes I don't do that very well if I don't think things out beforehand, but I just wanted to share those thoughts with everyone tonight, and that's it.
Okay. So in light of, our discussion about a search firm, just thinking ahead and providing you all with lots of information that will help you as we go forward in terms of looking at search firms and doing our process and our due diligence through all of that. I mean, there are some highlights, which are one, which Jared mentioned. We want a search firm who understands the importance of our community's voice in this process.
And our students.
And community, students, staff, parents, everyone, and their importance and their voice in this process, and making sure that they understand what our needs are as a district, and making sure that we get the leader that can take our district forward in a transformational way. And then also, obviously, you know, nothing is free. And so just looking at the information that has been provided so far, we're going to have to invest anywhere from $25,000 to $40,000 in order to engage a search firm that will bring us the best candidate. So those are just some things that we're gonna have to start mulling over. There are lots of things that the board has to do, even though Ally had mentioned it to me. There's a lot of work that goes into this process over and above all the things that a search firm is going to do. So we as a board are going to have to buckle in, because there's a lot that's going to be required of us. And so I just want to read a statement, and the statement will go out in many different on many different platforms, and Teresa, our Director of Communications, is going to help push this out tonight. But from our board, we say, Dear District 308 community, in response to Dr. Sparlin's announcement to retire at the end of the 22-23 school year, the Board of Education is beginning the process of selecting a new superintendent. The first step is to identify and evaluate search firms who might assist us in this process. Students, staff, parents, and our extended community will have opportunities to provide input and be involved in the search for our next superintendent. At the January 23rd board meeting, we will share details of the avenues of communication available specifically for feedback and input on this very important matter. We will continue to provide you with updates as this process evolves. Thank you. Okay, now we will have our 6.3 student ambassador report.
Hi everyone. So our new members have officially been selected for the SSAC, and we're hopefully meeting on the 18th for an introductory information review on our roles and responsibilities regarding our goals for this year, which include mental health. Dr. Paul and Ms. Dahlquist will also be attending this meeting as we continue to make plans for this upcoming year.
And I know that you briefly mentioned this, but we're going to continue exploring the facets of mental health, the sub-issues that we want to look into, and we do want to look into the possibility of creating another student survey that'll evaluate how students view mental health, the specific sub-issues that they want us to look into regarding relationships with teachers or relationships between students, homework, things like that. And I know that last year when we were targeting sexual harassment, we built the second student survey to better understand what students understood about sexual harassment, if they had any insight on how we could work to make sure it wasn't happening in our schools, and that was very helpful. And I think having that additional insight will be crucial in our understanding of how we'll be able to amplify student voice in the future, and ensure that these mental health problems that aren't limited to our district, they expand far beyond that. But within our district, at the very least, how we can begin targeting that here. We're, again, going to thank everyone who applied for the SSAC position. We're so excited to work with the people that are on our executive board, but we want to encourage students to continue coming forward and bringing their insight in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
How many members are there now?
I think it's a little bit bigger now. It's between 13 and 14, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think 13's the number,
13?
Anya, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look at me. Okay, but yeah, so we definitely got some more voices this year. Having like a small group was really nice for like that period of time. But as we're addressing these bigger issues, and we want to make sure that we're actually getting, that wide, diverse set of perspectives that our student body has. Like, I'm really excited to work with a bigger group and to see like where our conversations will go now that we have more insight.
And I encourage you to continue to bring it proactively to the board. You don't have to wait for a board comment or what have you. continue to use your voices and have a seat at the table, and you don't need to ask permission.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had a significant number of students who applied, and the student ambassadors, along with the rest of the committee, conducted the interviews, created the questions. You know, Dr. Waller and I were in the background, just watching and listening, and it was phenomenal. And the diversity, this group is so well-rounded now, and I'm really excited to be getting together on the 18th.
Yeah, and they were all just like so amazing. I think I learned something from all of them. So it wasn't just about who we selected, but I think just having the interviews was so insightful. So I guess that kind of like helped me realize that this year maybe I want to help expand like our student ambassador to the rest of our student body to make sure that they understand like what it is, and maybe help them communicate more directly with us, because everyone has such great perspectives, and a lot of our students care, even though maybe they don't really know how to show it yet because they don't feel like they have the resources. And I think that's a big part of what the SSAC is supposed to do. It's supposed to be a resource.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
All right, 7.1, consent agenda. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? Okay, if not, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
You sure can, but why do I feel like I'm in the wrong area? Oh, I'm sorry. I make a motion to approve all items under consent, including 7.1, minutes from the December 5th, 2022 Board of Education meeting, open and closed session.
Second.
Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Item 8.1 is information on financial statements. Does the board have any questions on what's been presented this evening? Hearing none, go. 8.2, resolution authorizing the issuance of tax anticipation warrants. So this is an informational item in regards to the TAWs, and Dr. Pesky is going to present.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sparlin. So as we were just talking about at our early agenda item, it's that time to look at our cash flow and issuing tax anticipation warrants. For those who are unfamiliar with those, tax anticipation warrants are exactly that. We're anticipating the revenue from taxes. Our next payment will be in June, but until June, our cash, what we have in the bank for our ongoing expenditures, will not be enough to cover our expenses. So looking at our cash flow, or what I'm presenting with you here, is very similar to what we had last year. It's a parameters resolution, and those parameters are we could issue up to $20 million. We will probably not, based on our cash flow analysis now, we will not need to borrow $20 million. We're probably looking at $10 million at this point. And the other parameter is the interest rate that you're allowing us. Last year it was a 3%. This year, with inflation, we've been advised that it could possibly be a 6% interest rate on the money that we borrow. So, and then the other thing is when we sell them, in here it says that we would have until May 31st. But looking at our cash flow, April is the first month where we're looking at a negative cash flow. And we won't get our revenues until June. So we'll need those tax anticipation warrants for April, May, and June. And then we'll pay them back in July. So we're looking at about a four-month borrowing of $10 to $15 million.
You know, something that I just thought about is pertinent to the conversation is what we were just talking about with the importance of having a fund balance. You know, if we had the fund balance of 20%, that equals no more TAWs, which equals no more interest on money that we have to borrow. So that's another reason, again, pointing out here, for the reason for the fund balance.
If you don't mind, that equals a few FTE, right? So.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
So
that's exactly right.
We're in the business of educating kids, and so yeah, spending money potentially unnecessarily, hurts.
But see, to a couple things, like to your point, I mean, I don't disagree with you. That's a great point, right? But see, that's my point, right? when you bring up, okay, well, that's a couple FTEs, that's exactly what
No, I
I'm
know.
saying. Like, we need to start doing this with the budget. Like, we need to start saying, hey, I don't know what it is. Hey, you don't want to raise the levy, it's, I don't know, 50 FTEs, whatever it is, right?
Oh, yeah,
You know,
at least, yeah.
I mean, but that's what we need to start
Make it
having
more.
that, we need to start having that conversation. One quick thing on the TAWs, can we get a follow-up at some point at a future board meeting to see who buys and
Yeah.
what it costs us?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't it also be a very interesting number of all the interest that we've paid, like just pick a time period for the last 10 years? Now, I'm very proud because we did pay it off early last year and saved $17,000, so I don't want to discredit that, but the amount of interest we've paid for all these, what I call payday loan shark loans, has got to be pretty significant.
I
too.
Well,
think
these-
that's a great point because it adds a lot of context to the conversation.
Yep.
Because, you know, it may be 150,000 a year, but like you just said, over 10 years, it's $1.5 million.
And you have to compound all of
Right.
that too.
Right.
So, yeah.
And what is interesting is when I think, I don't know, 3 years ago, we were at $25 million in terms of tax anticipation loans, and then we inched down to 20. Now we're down to 10.
Yeah.
Well,
mean-
but keep in mind, the reason we're there right now is because of our debt service extension, the money
Oh.
that we borrowed. As soon as we spend that money on capital projects, that's an additional 18 million we will not have towards our cash flow. So,
Well, we
Yeah.
still need to grow the reserve, so.
correct, and that's
Yeah.
one
So
reason,
that's-
we'll still be
that's-
building the reserve, so we will be coming down, but not a $20 million landfall, so. But good point.
And I know in the past, we have literally had neighboring school districts have bought them. So I mean, we're literally indirectly funding neighboring school districts. So
That was Plainfield most recently, right?
Yeah, last year it was Plainfield was one of them. I forget who the second one was, but you're exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, we want to get to the point where we're not,
Dependent.
we don't need
Yeah.
to borrow money to pay our bills.
Yeah, that's why I really, helping to keep the board focused on that 20% fund balance is so critical. That's why it's part of the Envision 308 plan, it's a very important part of what we need to be financially responsible.
Because that 25 million, when we borrowed it, we paid $120,000 in interest for that.
You know what, I'd have to look and confirm, but that doesn't sound off, especially you probably needed it for 6 months,
Yeah.
and at 25 million for 6 months, that could be very close to that.
Latanya and I don't forget because we signed.
Exactly.
So today, as Dr. Sparlin said, this is just information. If there's any questions about tax anticipation warrants, I'll make myself available. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And this will come back to action to the board on January 23rd. And what you're taking action on is just the parameters, giving me the ability to, between now and May, sell up to $20 million at 6% for tax anticipation purposes.
Very good. Any other questions regarding this item? All right, hearing none. Item 8.3 is a continued discussion regarding vendors and contracts. Since this is a new process, we wanted to put this on for information to get feedback from the board. And tonight, Dr. Petsky has brought this forward to show where the business office is in regards to addressing any vendors who have a cumulative dollar amount that exceeds $20,000 and where we're at. So, Dr.
Yeah.
Petsky?
Great, and I added, and I apologize about the delay, but I just got this to Ursula today to post for the board. But based on our last conversation where Eugene and I had done kind of subcategories and totals, so you could monitor the spending in that area, I added to it that all of the totals we've been talking about so far have been what we provided to the auditors for last year's FY22 budget. So that's all the numbers the board has seen is the contracts and vendors that we spent last year. And what I've added to this now is our current spending as of December this year. What have we spent up to with the same vendors, or if additional vendors made it to that list? And I've added to that as well, what the board has asked me to do, or the direction that I was given through cabinet was to either, if a vendor reaches that $20,000 mark or starts getting close to that $20,000 mark, do we, A, enter into a contract with that vendor to make sure that we have the best pricing and a relationship with that vendor that is, meets the board policy, about $20,000 in spending. Number two, in addition to the possibility of entering a contract, is the idea of perhaps going out to RFP for getting the best prices, or make sure we're getting the best prices on the things that we're buying. And the third option that the board directed was to look at a preferred vendor so we can gain some efficiencies in our spending. Perhaps we're buying paper at $45 from one vendor, and that vendor, we're up to $20,000, where we could get it from Office Depot for half the price. So we no longer go for the one higher priced vendor, and we gain some efficiencies in who our budget managers can use to purchase from. When I looked at that list, and Cabinet and I have been going through this, so Dr. Sparlin, Faith, Heather, Teresa, and myself have been really looking at this and taking a look at the process and monitoring some of our spending. And the other option that popped up was status quo. Maybe on here there is a vendor, for instance, one of our attorneys that we spend $100,000 with. Well, we don't necessarily have a contract, but we know what they're doing for us, and we are okay with that spending as our district attorney at that number. So we're not necessarily gonna revisit going into a contract. We could. We wouldn't necessarily consider going into an RFP, or we wouldn't look at going to another attorney for doing that work because there are designated attorneys. So for that one, we would just mark it down as status quo. We know that spending, what it is, and going down the list, when you look at these, there's some software programs that are over the $20,000. We don't have a contract with them, but they're a vendor, and they're just a little bit over that $20,000 mark. And we don't, no one else would offer that same software, that same level of service. So our budget manager for that software program purchased that software. So that would be another one that's status quo, although that is something we could look at. Why don't we have a contract with them, and do we need to pursue that? So there's kind of that gray area between status quo and actually having a formal contract with them, or them just being a vendor. So based on that information, I've provided for the board a comparison of what we spent total last year with these vendors, and then currently what we spent from July 1st until December 31st this year, and we're halfway through the year. So you can take a look at some of those costs. And what I'm looking at doing today in terms of providing this for information from the board is to make sure that the cabinet and myself are on the mark with what the board would like to do. And based on your feedback, I'm going to be revisiting this with my finance team to continue to monitor and start adding check marks into these columns. For instance, status quo, we just continue what we're doing, we present that to the board, and it gets a check mark, it's done immediately. If we need to enter into a contractual relationship, believe it or not, that is the same length of time as it would take to go to RFP. So to do that would take about 3 weeks or one board meeting cycle to go through. So about a 3-week time frame. And if we do the preferred vendors and look at reducing the vendors and the efficiencies that we can gain in using select vendors, that's something that can happen within a week, just communicating to our budget managers. So nothing on this, nothing that the board is asking us to do would take a long time. But I do want to start with my team communicating that, monitoring that, and making sure that we're all on the same page. So
one quick call.
Can I just give a little context as to how we got here? I think that it's really important to understand that many of the board members, I won't say all, we were somewhat surprised to learn that certain vendors may not have had a contract, may have had a contract, that we were not fully aware of the processes and procedures for how money was spent, and also that in the business world, there is an opportunity when you have vendors to either go to RFP, even if you've worked with them for multiple years, because typically what happens is people feel a little bit more inclined to continue to give you certain levels of service. And so I want to make sure we provide that context to everyone. We also were really searching for some transparency, other than a bill pay list where a lot of us were doing our own calculating and creating our own spreadsheets. Let's do it as a group and understand, okay, from a legal perspective, I don't even know what some law firms might be named. Let's see how much we're spending on law firms. Let's see how much we're spending on curriculum. Let's see how much we're spending on, I don't even know what we call some of these things, but ed services and so forth. Because when you look at it as a block of money, it tells a different story and it paints a different picture. And one of the things that I've shared multiple times with the board members is that a financial mentor of mine told me, you don't need to tell me your priorities. I can look at your checkbook and it will tell you our priorities. So we needed to see it in a different way. I do want to share openly that I still strongly urge this board to put in a vendor review policy and or a very strong vendor review procedure, if you will. I think that when we don't hold our vendors accountable, whether it be the food service or what have you, Ingenuity or whatever, it's very easy to become complacent. And I would like to see us make sure that everyone is aware of our district goals, board goals, and to make sure they're meeting the parameters that we've set forward. And I think one of them should be DEI as well. Like, do you have a diverse staff and so forth? So I think that we're getting there, but I still think we have a ways to go. And I would like to see us to put in a vendor review policy. Doesn't mean that we're going to pick another vendor. It just means that they're going to, after so many years, they're going to come to the table and put an RFP just in like everybody else. It's no different if we have employees who want to be promoted and they have to interview just like everybody else. So I think we still, I think we need to look for money and see where we're spending and where we shouldn't be spending. I know I talk about paper a lot. I know I talk about why we're spending money on printing business cards in the digital world. And then I constantly look at that Amazon number and think there's got to be a better way. So just my 2 cents.
Well, so if we were to go to contract route, so I think terms of service expectations would need to be part of it. Depending on the budget manager and their input, I think that has to be taken into consideration with each contract if we were to go a contract route. Sometimes you can structure a contract where you don't necessarily guarantee any volume, depending on what that service is. So I mean, looking at the flexibility, but yeah, I mean, levels of service. Trying to think of some of the other things that stay away from auto renewals. But obviously all that has to go through budget managers. So it would be a process to get contracts out and negotiated with all of these vendors. But I think in general it's probably worthwhile. I mean, there's probably, Amazon is probably, there's other retail vendors on here that you're not going to get that with because you're just going to go, you have to go buy supplies. But I don't know, I'd lean towards going contractual, but I'd like to, what are the budget managers saying? I really would like to know if they see opportunities.
Yep. And that's where bringing them this information will help them see that, because I don't think individually they see what they're buying, they don't see what all the other budget managers are doing, so they don't see the volume. So this is a good tool to bring to them to say, well, yeah, it's only 3 boxes of paper for you, but district-wide, it's 300 boxes of paper. So. And
that was my question, and that's exactly what I wrote down. To me, when we go back to the context of why we were doing
and
this.
I hate talking about paper too.
Because
to me it's such a small item, but it comes up all the time.
Maybe we need to spend less on paper.
But contextually, it may not be less on paper, but my question that I wrote down, can the budget managers easily search and find the preferred vendors that we keep mentioning? but do the budget managers across the district know what other people are doing? Because to me, I think that's where we can realize the efficiencies, and we may, if we all can get on one accord and start to order from that same place, that may dictate that vendor, or I shouldn't say dictate, or, well, necessitate that vendor to treat us differently, because right now it may be 2 or 3 different people calling them, and they may treat us as 3 or 4 individual customers as opposed to a one Community Unit School District 308. So I think that the main thing that we have to look at as we're doing this across the board are what are the best practices for the budget managers that will help us to be more efficient so that we can now maximize the reason why we're doing all of this. Because if we don't do that, then we will still, I don't think we'll still realize the benefits and cost savings from a centralized ordering process. And again, I know that's probably a lot more easier said than done, but I think now presenting this to all of the budget managers and having them have that conversation, I think that's a place we can start.
Yeah.
Eugene, just to kind of piggyback off of that, I thought we had a central purchasing department that we brought in like 2013 or something like that in order to kind of handle all this. Can someone refresh my memory when we had kind of removed that section?
I couldn't understand her.
Purchasing department, why did we still have that department?
You know, I think what Lori might be hinting at, is it the central warehouse staff? Because we did have, we had some folks in buildings and grounds that were trying to maintain a central warehouse. And then we had some people in the finance department, and it just kind of devolved into budget managers buying what they need when they need it through our partners or our vendor relationships. So that's something I can look into more.
That's not what I'm referring to, actually.
Okay.
We had at one point, and I think that this was in one of the first year of finance committee meetings, we had hired somebody to kind of manage all purchases, and it had changed how we used P cards.
Yeah, I remember that exactly, Lori. Yeah,
You remember that, Dominic?
yeah, it was supposed to, the position was supposed to be paid by the P card reimbursements, but yeah, it potentially wasn't materializing. Is my guess, but yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I do know a lot of vendors, because I work for a large, corporate as well. They don't necessarily want to take P cards because then they got to pay that high interest, the interchange fees. But do you remember that? Does that ring a bell at all? Do you? No.
No one was
That's
here.
before his time.
No.
Yeah.
That was before his time. He's
Yeah.
not going to
They're
remember that.
just like, none of them were here. So
I
that's
mean,
what
I can
happened.
talk to, I know that some people in the
Turnover.
finance department have been here for quite a while. I can ask them about that initiative, who that person was and what happened. I'm sure they
We
can
also
share
have
that.
minutes. And,
Yeah.
You said about 2013?
Imagine on personnel.
But I don't know if it's even necessary to relook at it, but just the spirit of why we were doing it, can we look at it and see what makes sense now?
Yeah.
And because all it is a purchasing department is centralizing the purchasing to make sure that we're realizing the efficiency. So I would say, based on the spirit of what Lori is saying, does that make sense? And because again, I'm not telling you all to do that. I'm just saying it's a consideration, because I don't know the amount of work that it would go into, or if that would even be worth the work, because would it cost us more in time than not? But I think that it's but I do know this for sure, that if we don't consider it, then all of the efforts that we're putting in to realize the efficiencies, I believe will be lost.
Yeah.
There's markets. There's markets. There's .com markets where you can put out your invoices to the vendors that you're paying, and you say, hey, you give me a 7%. We'll give you. We'll pay you early if you give us a 7%, reduction on what we pay you, and that annualizes out pretty good. I don't know if we have a big enough, because 85% of
Purchasing
our,
power,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, 85% of our expenditures goes to
Salaries.
salaries, you know, so if you look at that, it's a pretty small pool that we're talking about here. But, I mean, it's something, I don't know, if it might not even be worth the infrastructure spend, you know, on the IT side, but
we do
there's opportunities out there for things like that. And I don't even, and since we don't have a reserve, we might not be able to even do it. It's just, I'm thinking out loud here, and I probably shouldn't be.
Nope, you're fine. And
But there's
to go along with that, all the ideas that you guys are talking about, you know, when we talk about going to RFP, the other thing that we'll eventually come to the board with, and that's one thing I need to work with my team on, is we are members of purchasing cooperatives. So instead of going to RFP, we can leverage a cooperative. What does that mean legally? How does that meet the RFP? So there's some information I can share with the board, but I'd like to get through this first, and then and start going through this, and then eventually looking at, okay, how many RFPs, what type of materials are we looking at purchasing, and can we go through Sourcewell or Buy Board or some of these other, there's a group out there called Compare Co-ops, which you can say, hey, I'm looking for paper, since we're talking about that, or looking for paper, and you can put it in there, and it'll tell you the 4 different co-ops that are selling paper at this cost, and you can lock into that cost. It's as if you as a district wrote the RFP. So there's some purchasing cooperatives that have really become big in the last 3-4 years that I think we could leverage a little bit better as well. So that'll be a part of this evolving
So
conversation.
this is where having the discussion with the budget manager is probably, and with the holistic viewpoint as well, you know, obviously.
The other thing that
it might be, some things might be best for, depending on the vendor.
Correct.
And the purpose.
The other thing that I was hoping we could, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place, but there's a reason that I'm suggesting it, and I've been thinking about it for a long time. When we experienced a lot of growth, we started just kind of putting people in random places throughout the community. And one of the reasons that sometimes I feel like we have some inefficiencies is because we don't have all our administration under one roof. And I was very shocked to hear how much we spend in other buildings, specifically Mason Square. But can we just see like a portfolio of the district of all of the buildings that we're paying for? And, you know, my dream someday, I've shared this with Dr. Sparlin, is, you know, to have everybody under one roof. Obviously, we have a lot more priorities, but I do think there are efficiencies gained, I think, from a cultural perspective and from a financial perspective. But I think we should also see what our portfolio of real estate looks like, and the money that's going out for that as well. And I don't know if we can just append that to the end of this document. It would just be really helpful for us to see, and the parts of real estate that we own that are kind of not doing anything for us, like the land we own for the 3rd high school, the land that has
Right on Route 71.
Thank you, Old Trauber and all of that. I think it's really important to understand that. And we also have to still maintain, you know, that we have to pay taxes on and maintain buildings. So can we have like an overview of that? So we
I don't think we pay taxes.
Yeah, we don't
but
pay taxes. So.
Generally, an asset for a governmental unit is pretty much a liability because you have to maintain it. So.
Well, but I mean on the buildings that we don't own, the leases that we have, it all extrapolates out to whatever we want to call it, wherever we want to put it on our spreadsheet, but it all has a financial impact on our bottom line.
Jen, one of the plans that Dr. Petsky had referred to earlier, you know, in regards to, it will address a lot of what you're talking about, you know, because, you know, I totally agree with you. To have all the administration under one roof is great in many respects. In many respects, and at one time, a few years ago, I had accomplished that and it brought them all under one roof. And then we have three-phase plan that we started a few years ago that we just weren't able to continue with. So that's part of the plan that we're working on now, because it brings them all back. It brings the whole administration back under one roof. It addresses growth for the Pathways program. It addresses growth for the early childhood program at Brokaw, and as well as the some other areas of the school district, and consolidate some of those areas. Like we have that property on 71. Okay, what do you do with that? If you're sold it, what's that property worth? What can we do with that? Where can we reinvest that into the school district? The Mason Square, that you mentioned there, what's that property worth? If we took the people that are housed there and got them all under one roof, that's another building facility that we don't have to maintain, and then we could reallocate those resources to the plan as well. So we're getting close to bringing that back, and it's a good plan, and we look forward to having more conversation on it.
And I feel like another reason we got into this was because we were outsourcing money and spending double to outsource what we could be paying our people. So that was another reason we got into this. And it's the same thing. It's like I talked to you one day about why we don't have a turf field and all these other places, and Yorkville just announced it. We spend so much money to have our fields. We can't use them. But if we were to say we want to put turf in, there would be an uproar, and I understand it, but we have to start having and putting a narrative around how expensive we are functioning by not looking to the future. And so we need to see these things. They need to be in plain sight, even if it's just putting it in board docs every week and somebody asks a question about it.
It's what I always say are efficiencies that end up costing us money.
Way more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one thing too, just on a side note, I would love sometime to see, I see on the very end of this list, at the very, very, very bottom, it says Village of Oswego Water. I would love to see sometime the projections on that and how that's going to affect us in the future when it comes to our budget, because I got a bad feeling about where that's going.
I was going to say, I think, Dr. Pesky, you've started that conversation already, haven't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that's right. The Friday update. I just got the information the day before break, so I do have the information for you about the cost. So I'm like, didn't Jared read the update? I'll
We're
get
trying
that
to
to
figure
you.
out how we're
Yeah, I've
going
got
to pay for Lake Michigan water.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a bad feeling on where the price of that's going.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so we said we were gonna help each other with the deliverables for the administration, so you got them all? Somebody,
They're on the
hope
list.
somebody's got it.
Yeah, this is great, and it's great for the community. It's great to get the information out there. Yeah.
All right, the next item is 8.4. It's an informational item regarding bus lease agreements for activity buses at the high school.
So this goes back to a conversation that we had at the beginning of the year with the transportation challenges that we've had. We've had after-school athletics be a real challenge. We've had to since rent out the coach buses to take teams and whatnot because we didn't have the ability with just 2 activity buses at each high school to get a full team where they needed to go. And so then the conversation turned into, well, can we get more activity buses? And we have been nose to the grindstone trying to dig up activity buses. And the bus company shared with me, in a normal year, the car manufacturers, Chevy and Ford, usually give about 3,000 chassis for their vans to be able to convert to activity buses. But with the procurement issues and things due to COVID, they reduced that number from $3,000 or 3,000 units per year to like 150 units. It was way low. So activity buses have been hard to find. We back in the fall, we asked 2 of our bus companies, local bus companies, to get us on a waiting list for when the next buses would become available. And we're happy to say that those activity buses will be available beginning of next year. So we can take possession of these. This is just an information item, but things have changed a little bit since this went to the board. What happened is our other second company came to us with the same buses and very similar buses, and they are less. So we went back to this company to say that, did you sharpen your pencil and are we getting the best deal? So we got a little bidding war going. And so today, for information, we're telling the board we have the opportunity to get 4 buses, 4 activity buses, but we are going to, when we bring it to action, it could either be this company that you see tonight, or it could be a second company who has the same buses but less money, or this company for less money. So that's a good thing. The way Mike has orchestrated this, we have 4 buses, 2 at each high school currently on a lease. This would be 4 additional buses, so each high school would have 4 buses. But if we do get our transportation staff up to par, and we're able to go back to athletics through large buses and through more drivers, then we'll have 2 leases, and one of them we can just let it run out, not renew, and go back to the 4 buses, 2 at each high school. So this gives us some options, and I was happy with the way that Mike orchestrated this one rather than waiting and adding this onto our existing lease. So any questions on that?
2 questions. So if that's the case, so does that double the number of drivers needed in order to do that? I'm just trying to process
each
that.
bus can take up to 14 students. So some of the sports, they can just take 1 bus or 2 buses. Some of the larger sports, they would need to take all 4. And I know the high schools have talked to us about using off-season coaches to be the drivers for the on-season coaches. So they've got some ideas about getting them. Okay. And I've asked Mike to share with me the number of miles that the activity buses are driving to make sure that the buses we do have out there in the field are getting used, and they are.
Got it. And
when are they getting fixed? Because one of your buses over at OHS is having a,
And those buses are due next year to be renewed, so we'll get 4 new buses in place of these older buses.
And the other is what are the implications of us not doing this?
Not doing this, we would be utilizing the coach buses, the kind of the luxury buses, which are costing us about $2,400 round trip, as opposed to a regular school bus, which costs us about $600 round trip. And these activity buses would, they're about $20,000 per year for 5 years. So it's not a bad deal. And right now on this, you'll see the proposals here are $20,000 per year per bus, and the new proposals that we're looking at are about $15,000 to $16,000. So we save about $4,000 or $5,000 per year per bus.
Ooh, per bus.
Yes.
Per bus.
Wow. Okay.
And have we attempted to go after any grants regarding green buses?
Yeah, we have taken a look at that, and that's going to stay on our radar. We're watching some surrounding districts, especially since one of the companies that does the battery-powered buses just built a shop down in, is it like Peoria or something, or fairly close. So they're looking to get into surrounding districts. The problem is tooling for those new buses. There's an expense to that. And then the cost benefit. Right now, it costs us more money, even with the rebates, to change to the electric or the propane fueled buses, but we'll keep an eye on those costs, and when we reach a break-even point, we will look at growing our inventory to more of a green level bus. We did have one district that used them south of us, Joliet. Come wintertime, none of their electric buses would start. It was too cold for the batteries to kick them over. So we had problems with gelling diesel, but we just added some additives to our gas, got them fired up, and they were sitting there with dead buses. So,
can I, as part of that conversation when we had it originally, we talked about returning some of our currently leased buses that are just sitting in the fleet. Where are we with that?
Yeah, that'll come up on the next agenda item with the buses. But real quick, I did ask Mike about that one, and we're using GPS to track all of our buses. And we're at the kind of industry norm of we have about 8 to 10% of our buses that are not used. But those buses are then used when we have a bus breakdown. We have that 8 to 10% inventory to put out there and to use in place of the buses that are breaking down. If we have a bus that gets stuck, we need to send another bus to go relieve. So we are utilizing all of the buses that we have. So, And we expect to, after this contract negotiation, we expect to get back up to our staffing levels so we can uncondense the routes, spread them out a little bit more, and then have those extra buses, the 8 to 10%, be used for drivers on those new routes.
Can I ask my bus questions that I never got to? Because I didn't know we were combining the board comments with, I thought you were just asking about this. I didn't know that was our board comment also.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I did come in here tonight very much concerned about bus routes. So I'm sorry, it doesn't necessarily have to do with your presentation, but I'm not leaving here without talking about the bus routes today. How do we know the changes we're making are actually working? What's our feedback on all the changes that we've made? I know, did we do a trial run?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and yes. So we'll be following up with the, with the drivers. We're monitoring the radios. We'll be following up with the principals to gain feedback from them in regards to looking at the number of parent phone calls and it's things such as that, and monitoring the buses drop-off and pickups in the morning. And I'm sure there'll be some tweaks that'll need to be made to the plan that went forward today, but from all indications, it was better, and hopefully over the next few days, as those drivers become more familiar with those routes and kids as well as the stops, it'll become better. Again, we're trying to fix an issue without, like I said earlier, having that key variable is the right number of drivers to do what we're trying to do.
The one concern, and listen, I do want to reiterate what you said. I'm very appreciative. I don't want to sound not appreciative and all of those things, but the vast majority of concerns, yeah, I'll go with concerns. That's a good word. Concerns, yeah. Concerns that I fielded were, again, junior high. And it gets at me, right? That seems to be where, I don't know how we end up doing this to our junior high students. And they're a very diverse group, and I'm talking about size, right? So if you can fit 3 junior high students on a seat and get away with it fabulously in one row, and in the next row, good luck to you, right? And so I fielded a lot of concerns today about junior high, and so I don't know if you could attest to that, if that was...
Jared, any of those concerns, if you could funnel those to Dr. Petsky,
Okay.
and so he can work with Mr. DeArmond in regards to that, and that's what we need to hear. We need to hear the concerns and the issues from the new implementation from, that started today, so we can, again, continue to tweak it to make it as good as we can with what we're dealing with.
And the supervision piece, right? So I want to make sure that we're not just dropping off
that would not
junior high
happen, right.
students and they're not supervised. I don't want that either. So.
No, nobody wants that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, item 8.5 is information in regards to bus lease agreements, regular size buses.
Yeah, so these are 29 regular size, or actually not regular size. These are 27 passenger, 30 passenger. There are smaller special ed buses. Last year at this time, we had the 71 passenger buses that we renewed with the board, and this is now 29 smaller buses that we use for special education that we are renewing the leases for. So these buses go back, the end of the 5-year lease is up, and we get new buses to replace those.
Because the entire fleet is on a rotation, correct?
The entire fleet is on a rotation, yep.
Any questions regarding this? I think some of the questions and dialogue we just had answered some of this.
Most of them. The only question I have is, will we have drivers for these? I don't want to spend money if we don't have drivers for the buses.
Yeah, we do. These would be taking the place of buses that drivers are currently driving the buses. Those old buses go back and they get their new buses. So.
Do we have across the entire fleet? Is it just 5 buses that have lifts?
Say that again. 5
I'm
buses?
yeah, it says on here, it says the 5 buses, or the 2 sections at the bottom, those are the ones that have a lift. In our total fleet, do we only have 5 buses?
Yeah,
with
that's
lifts?
the 3, 24 plus 3 means you could do 24 students, or you could add 3 more to the number that bus can carry, but we take out the seats and they take the wheelchairs, so those last 5 buses have wheelchair lifts.
I don't
No,
think
he's
that
asking
answered
how
the
many,
question
yeah.
that you asked.
5.
I think the answer to your question, Eugene, is that out of the buses that are on the rotation for leaving, these are the number of buses that have, so out of the other 4 rotations, there are multiple buses that have lifts on it as well.
Yeah, because I'm like, we only have 5 buses with lifts. That was
5
concerning.
rotations,
Okay,
yeah.
Got it.
And do we have to, like, I don't know if this makes any sense, but do we have to do all of them right now?
Yeah, because they're on a lease after a 5-year term, so we leased them for those 5 years. We could have gotten a little bit cheaper price for going more than 5 years. The problem is then we're also responsible for the maintenance on that, so we give the buses up before we need to start paying for the maintenance and upgrades on those buses, and we trade them in. So these buses will be on the market for other districts to lease or buy, and we'll have buses that we won't have to worry about breaking down
But I
or
guess that's
changing
my
tires.
question, like, it's again, is it half a dozen of one, 6 of another? I guess, is this smart, is this a smart way to do it? I mean, we might not take on the maintenance, but then what if those buses don't have maintenance, and then we just keep being on a perpetual leasing?
Yeah, in our experience, this is the most efficient way to do our bus fleet, so, yeah.
So how many, on how many buses in a fleet? Is it about 30, average about 30 in a fleet?
No, when he uses the word fleet, he means all of the buses that
Oh,
we,
all
all together,
Okay,
correct, yeah.
so 29 in this rotation,
27 last year, so yeah, 27, 29, and then I'll have to find out from Mike what the next 3
that's okay, I
rotations
just wanted
are.
to kind of figure out, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Very good. Okay, item 8.6 is the 23-24 school calendar, which is an annual information item around this time. The calendar committee, which is a standing committee outlined in the OEA collective bargaining agreement, met on a couple different occasions to finalize what's being presented to you today as information. The calendar that's being presented is very similar to this year's calendar. The first day of students is Wednesday, August 16th, and the last day is Friday, May 24th, which is prior to Memorial Day. And one change that was made was to move up parent-teacher conferences from the 2nd week in November to the 4th week in October, so that formal communication with parents could happen earlier. This item is for information this evening, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
I have 2, have we considered or talked about the week of Thanksgiving
We did.
not going to school? There's just not a ton of impactful instruction that I've experienced. Lots of
Yeah.
parties
There is
and-
at the high schools.
Yeah,
What?
There is at the high schools.
Yeah,
Okay.
that has been a topic of conversation, but for the it's another break in the year, but the teachers felt exactly like what Ally just said, that we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay.
And then, while it's not relating to the calendar dates, has a committee been formed to discuss start times?
So, yes.
Yes, you say.
But we do not have membership from the OEA. They're working on that right now, but we do have a date in January that we're working on that. I think by tomorrow I will have a finalized list of names.
Thank you. And you'll let us know
Yes.
what the status of that is, because it has been one of the things that I've heard the most about from our community this year.
Especially middle school.
Hey, is our countywide institute the same as Kane County
Countywide, yes.
this year?
Okay, that's our last informational item. We can move on to 9.1, bills for payment.
Okay. 9.1 action item, approval of bills for payment. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to authorize the payment of bills in the amount of $3,943,498.70 as presented.
Second.
Mr. Cerrone,
Yes.
Mr. Gatewood,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Ploger,
Aye.
Ms. Swanson, Mrs. Doyle,
Aye.
Ms. Simulton.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Action item 9.2, approval of updated intergovernmental agreement on resource officers. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the updated intergovernmental agreement on high school student resource officers as presented.
Second, but I have
Yeah.
a couple things on this before we vote.
Yeah, me too.
Number one, who wrote the agreement? Do we know who wrote the agreement?
Yes, it was reviewed by Whitlaw.
Thank you. And the second piece is I wanted to thank you for getting back to me as far as what SRO pay looks like as far as costs from districts around us. What we're paying as far as the price is pretty comparable to other districts. However, percentage-wise, there are districts that are not necessarily paying 100%. And of course, there are some outliers too. And then there's some I know that are difficult to find, right? And I know, like for instance here, Joliet is saying maybe they're not paying, but they're paying something. We just don't know what, because they're some kind of special assignment rate. And then there's Yorkville, who apparently they're not paying. So thank you, Yorkville, for that example. And then Naperville 203 is only paying, it looks like 50%. However, if you were to take 50% of that salary, it's pretty comparable to what we're paying. So you have to figure that piece as well. It is also interesting that some of these only pay the salary only, some of them pay a little bit more. So there are some, West Aurora, looks like that's 50%, but then there's some pieces about 9-month benefits and some pieces about clothing and so forth. There's a lot of stipulations on the West Aurora one. So it's not necessarily, and also it's interesting, the Joliet Police Department and the Plainfield one is on special assignment, so that's interesting. So it's not necessarily, hey, you just pay whatever, but I appreciate your due diligence on this, and I just wanted to pass that along. So thank you very much for the investigative work on that.
Chair, thanks for saying that, because Dr. Kincaid and Mr. Bell spent a large amount of time to find that information out. It wasn't easily accessible.
Right, and one of the pieces I want to say that, first of all, I want to thank our law enforcement in all of our communities. I mean, they provide a service that is immeasurable. But one of the reasons I bring this up, right, is because one of the places that when we talk about holding a levy and property taxes, one of the places that they go is to benefit their pension and so forth when you're talking about the village level. And so I'm happy to help them. I'm happy to be a part of helping people that we honor and that we want to that serve our community and so forth. The only thing I ask in return, though, is an honest conversation as a whole, and that's why I wanted to bring this up. And part of that conversation, also, by the way, is there are officers in other communities that are getting paid more as well. So keep that in mind as well. So thank you. I appreciate your hard work here. I can't stress that enough.
I have one comment. I appreciated Exhibit A and how it went into the goals and objective of the SRO program and the national standards and practices from the National Association of School Resource Officers. I just wanted to, I know when we had this discussion prior to now voting, we had quite a bit of discussion in regards to the role of the SROs and when and how they are engaged by staff. And I think, you know, based on all of the goals and objectives that are listed here in regards to, you know, making sure there's positive engagement and healthy attitudes for students toward the staff of toward law enforcement, et cetera, I think that's very important. However, we did talk about the standards of when we should engage them versus just having school staff engage the students. And so and as well as the training, the cross functional training from the SROs based on the standards that we have within the district. And so I think that, you know, SROs could be great inside of the schools, but I just want to make sure that they're great when used properly. And so I just wanted to stress the exhibits A, B, and C that are listed and to understand how we're using them in our schools to promote the objectives of the SROs in the district. And so nothing to necessarily be said, but just to make sure that we're utilizing them properly.
Thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Action item 9.3, approval of intergovernmental agreement of sharing services. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the shared services intergovernmental agreement as presented.
Second. I have a question on this one too. Same question. Who wrote the agreement on this one?
Yeah, this one was written
Reviewed
3
by
years
Whit.
ago by Ottenson Law, which is why we gave it to Whit Law to review and look for any inconsistencies.
Thank you.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Ms. Swanson?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Action item 9.1, approval of personnel report. Can I have a
9.4.
motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the personnel report as discussed in closed session.
9.4? 9.4.
Second.
Ms. Simulton?
Aye.
Mr. Ploger?
Aye.
Mr. Gatewood?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Cerrone?
Aye.
Ms. Doyle?
Aye.
Ms. Swanson?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Can I have a motion, 10.1, can I have a motion to go into closed session?
I make a motion to return to closed